Since its premiere on Broadway in 2003, Wicked has become one of the most popular American musicals of all time. A prequel and alternate telling of The Wizard of Oz that sheds light on the origins of the Wicked Witch of the West, the musical very quickly became an obsession of theater kids everywhere. Especially in the late 2000s, you'd be hard-pressed to find a high school theater or choir program that didn't feature the musical itself or its hit songs. Despite many of my own classmates performing those songs at solo and ensemble competitions, I was never able to catch a proper stage production of the musical and always hoped that a film adaptation might come along to remedy that blind spot. 2 decades later, we finally have the first act of that adaptation. And while it made me fall in love with the musical itself, as a work of cinema and adaptation, it leaves much to be desired. Wicked is a wild expansion of the Wizard of Oz lore that tells the origin stories of Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, and Glinda the Good, complicating the good versus evil narrative we're all familiar with in the original story. A classic tale of enemies to friends, or even lovers, as Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande hint at in their performances, and even more so in their press tour. The two navigate a rocky relationship at roommates at Shiz University, a school for witchcraft in the land of Oz. Elphaba, while ridiculed for her green skin, is quickly recognized by her teachers for her magical abilities, and slowly her relationship with Glinda and the other students improves. But it is all turned upside down when she discovers how the talking animals of Oz are facing systemic discrimination, and takes a stand against their oppression. Behind the curtain of the great and powerful Wizard of Oz, Elphaba finds a powerful political tale that was certainly resonant when the musical premiered during the George W. Bush administration, and is once again relevant to our current predicament: the rise of fascism. In the stage production, that tale is told through magnificent music, beautiful costuming, colorful sets, and dynamic lighting. In director John M. Chu's film, the music is as great as ever, but many of the other elements just aren't as vibrant. The chief problem is the color grading of the film. There are some wonderfully elaborate sets and eye-catching costumes at times, but all of it is sapped of life by the flat, low-contrast grading. This is the prequel to The Wizard of Oz, after all, a marvel of early Technicolor filmmaking. So it is strange that there is very little of that vibrancy to be found in Wicked. Of course, having a menagerie of differently colored characters set against a world filled with every color in the rainbow can present difficulties when trying to make your subjects really pop. But rather than spend the time to solve these problems with carefully considered production design, say as the original Wizard of Oz did, Chu and his team apparently decided just to flatten out the entire color spectrum, so we could always count on Elphaba's green skin and Glinda's pink outfits to stand out. It is a solution, I suppose, but a cowardly one considering the legacy he's trying to build upon. The flattening of the image is further exacerbated by some pretty boring lighting choices and an over-reliance on digital backgrounds. Nowhere is that more destructive than in the climax of the film and the highlight of the entire musical, Defying Gravity. Erivo's vocals carry the entire sequence. As she belts out the song so brilliantly, I think she ends up being even better than Idina Menzel, who originated the role. But while the stage production often uses a spotlight and dynamic backlighting to train its audience's focus solely on Elphaba, the film version of Defying Gravity starts in a dark, nondescript location and ends with Erivo flying around amidst the sludge of a digital background. The number is further sapped of its energy by additional stoppages in the music that are completely pointless and destroy the momentum the song relies on. So no matter how brilliant Erivo's vocals are, the climax of Chu's Wicked just can't possibly match the emotional impact that audiences have raved about for years with the stage production. There are still moments of brilliance in Chu's direction of this material, though. One of the musical's other highlight songs, What Is This Feeling?, a duet between Elphaba and Glinda, wonderfully uses the language of film montage to propel the number forward. Casting Jonathan Bailey as the pretty boy Fiyero turned out to be a brilliant decision, and he nearly steals the entire show in his performance of Dancing Through Life. Plus, the number features some of the best choreography from the background dancers, some really inventive production design, and shows Chu's talent for sweeping camera movement. And thankfully, one of the musical's most indelible songs, Popular, is definitely the showstopper it deserves to be. Though I think that Grande's performance far exceeds anything that Chu is doing behind the camera there. It has been a theme throughout this review, but Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, and Jonathan Bailey really are far and away the main reason Wicked works at all. I'm surprised to say it, but Grande ended up being my favorite performance of the bunch. She is truly a revelation, bringing us the ridiculously ditzy Galinda audiences have fallen in love with over the years, and showing a real sense of comedic timing. Plus, her vocals are thankfully much more musical theater than pop star, which was one of my main concerns going into the film. I do wish we got a bit more nuance from her at times, as she is fairly one note throughout the film, but she's so good at hitting that note, it's hard not to fall in love with her. Jonathan Bailey is also tremendous as the overly confident Fiyero. He is a beautiful man with an even more beautiful voice, and like Grande, excels in the comedic moments of the part. Though he also brings the nuance I was hoping for from her, giving you the sense that there is something deeper about this man than meets the eye. Erivo as a musical talent is completely unimpeachable. I got goosebumps every time she would break into song, and she has an undeniable charisma that draws you into her character. That being said, that charisma only goes so far, as once you get closer, it is hard at times to really get a sense of the inner life of this character. This isn't all on Erivo, though, as we know she is fully capable of delivering knockout dramatic performances. But here there are too many moments where it feels like she doesn't really know what to do. Ultimately a fault of this screenplay and the decision to stretch this story to its breaking point. The film, despite only covering the first act, runs longer than a typical performance of the entire musical. Yet it doesn't feel like they used that extra time to deepen the story's themes or its character development much at all. It explores the plight of the animals of Oz a tad more, and spends a bit more time in Elphaba's backstory, but a lot of the added time just weighs the pacing of the story down. Plus, the famous queer subtext between Elphaba and Galinda feels like it has been better explored in Erivo and Grande's press tour than the film itself. Stage musicals are often broad in their themes, and Wicked is no exception. But the language of cinema offers an opportunity to expand on theme through how a story is literally framed, the details included in those frames, and the sequence in which these images are presented to an audience. One shot in Steven Spielberg's criminally underrated 2021 remake of West Side Story is a perfect example of this. As the members of the Jets gang trash a police precinct during the musical number G Officer Krupke, they sing about how they are sociologically sick, and Spielberg deftly cuts to a terrified female secretary framed behind a metal cage that separates her from these men. Amidst the fun, catchy song, it reminds us how unscrupulous these men actually are, and foreshadows the threat that they will pose to a female character later on in the film. In Wicked, such deft use of the cinematic language is nearly non-existent. It's a story that should feel incredibly relevant to our current moment, yet its presentation is so vague that it can't possibly feel prescient. This is a story about a marginalized character who decides to take a stand in solidarity with another group that is being oppressed by a rising fascist movement. It's a story about an overly confident woman seated firmly within the upper echelons of the hierarchy, who is confronted with conflicting allegiances to her marginalized friend and her own personal advancement. It is about two women whose rocky relationship is dripping with queer subtext to be mined. Yet all of this is far more interesting in the aggregate than it is in the disparate images that Chu has assembled to tell this story. The camera is mostly used to make all of this look as aesthetically cool as possible, not to deepen our understanding of the themes running through this work. Having now viewed a bootleg version of the stage production and knowing where this story goes, I fear Chu's flattening of this work, both thematically and aesthetically, will only feel worse when part 2 comes out. Much like musicals like Into the Woods, this story only gets darker in the second half. And though its themes will likely feel even more relevant 1 year into the Trump administration, I have no confidence that Chu will be able to deliver on those themes. There are many plot points I know are coming that don't seem to have been properly set up in the first part already. So for as wonderful as the music in this film truly is, as tremendous as the performances are, and as enjoyable as the experience ended up being at points, Wicked ultimately ends up being a far better advertisement for a trip to the theater to see a stage production than it is as a work of cinema. That's not all bad. The musical is great, and I look forward to catching it live one day. But after waiting 20 years to see one of the most popular American musicals of all time on the silver screen, I can't help but wonder why we couldn't get a better creative team to deliver on that promise. Perhaps one day someone else will get a go at it. And perhaps it will feel more in line with the magic of The Wizard of Oz than just another big, flat Hollywood CGI fest that this ended up being. I'm giving Wicked 3 out of 5 stars. It is currently out in theaters and on VOD.